Okay, good morning and welcome to our Erev Shabbat Parashat edition of our class. This is not necessarily Shabbat HaGadol, though it is suggested for the rabbis and people to start getting ready and give Shabbat HaGadol-like classes in Derashot, but we're going to stick to the Parashat. The Parashat is a brand new book, Perashat Vayiqra, and the book of Vayiqra. And let's talk about ceremonial. The idea of korbanot, offering sacrifices, and why that could be detrimental sometimes if they are left to their ceremonial form. And then we'll talk about holiday of Pesach and how to attach and connect our ideas to it. So we are going to try to share a document. We have some technical difficulties with the actual document. So we're going to share a less formal type of, so to speak, document on an email, and I'll show you what I mean in a moment. The book of Vayiqra, especially Perashat Vayiqra, is essentially about korbanot, the rules of the various sacrifices, and the who, the how, and the when these sacrifices are offered. And it seems at some points mundane, monotonous, and difficult to keep our attention. There are wonderful and amazing objectives of why HaKadosh Baruch Hu directed us, instructed us to engage in this many mitzvot of offering sacrifices and korbanot. But the Torah opens up this large and broad discussion about offering sacrifices with a few introductory Pesukim that are nuanced, as are all the Pesukim of the Torah, but in a manner that makes us think a bit about not just the technicalities and the ceremonial gestures of giving korbanot, but of the how, and of the mental engagement and the what we call kavanah, the purposefulness, the intent, the meaning, and the mental energy behind he who participates in korbanot. So we're going to take you to somewhat of a shared document right now. And there it is. It's actually in an email, but we're doing our best this morning. And you can see, just follow where I'm pointing. Perashat Vayiqra, not just ceremonial. Well, you have these two Pesukim that open the Parasha. The first one is one which seems somewhat benign. Vayikra el Moshe v'deber Adonai elav me'ohel mo'ed. The Lord God called to Moshe and spoke to him from Ohel Mo'ed, which is synonymous with the Mishkan. At this point in time, the Mishkan chronologically was not yet erected, so this could be talking about the Torah, so to speak, out of order, or it could be talking about the Ohel, the area that was housing the Luchot HaBrit to this point. In any case, God communicated with Moshe, and what you can't see, because we had technical difficulties with our document, but this word Vayikra, if anyone who's ever looked in a Sefer Torah, to kiss it, to read it, and seen this word Vayikra, knows that the Aleph is small. It's one of what we call the Otiyot Ketanot, the small letters ran in the Torah. There are, as we'll discuss, a handful of others, and there is discussion as to whether these are what's called Halakha Moshe Misinai, meaning that they were actually traditionally passed down from the original giving of Torah on Har Sinai, and those letters were charged to Moshe Rabbeinu to be presented in the form in a smaller script, a small font size, so to speak, or whether or not this is something that was instituted by the Sofrim, by the Hachamim, who did copy and transmit the documentation of the Torah Shebichtav. Either way, we know that there are a handful of, a total of 6, which we'll list below soon, Otiyot ketanot, smaller letters. It grabs everyone's attention. Many classes and darashot you'll hear about the small aleph of Vayiqra. The next pasuk is what Hashem told Moshe to tell Am Yisrael. Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amarta alehem. Speak to them, and he's going to then go on with all the intricate laws of giving sacrifices. However, he starts by saying and presenting it in this manner: Adam ki yakrib mikem korban ladonai. A person, when you offer from yourselves a korban, a sacrifice to God. And everyone takes note of the form of this introductory statement with the word Adam. And we'll start by analyzing this, and then we'll work back to our first pasuk. So let's talk about it. What's unusual about the word Adam? The conventional way to present a mizvah command to an individual, or even speaking to Am Yisrael as one collectively, is using the word ish. It's used over and over many times in the Torah. The word Adam is usually used as being, as it is in Perashat Bereshit, or it refers to more internationally mankind in general. Adam in the Torah itself is usually not used in this form. What do I mean? Adam is usually in the Torah used as the description, the subject of a description. For instance, the Torah might say, Tum'at Adam, the impurity of man. Nefesh Adam, the being of man. Yedeh Adam, the hands of man. It's basically the subject of something else that's being described, but not a subject in and of itself. Rare is where the Torah addresses a person, a Jew, and calls him Adam, and that becomes the subject, and then charges or directs the mizvah. There are only 3 instances of that in the Torah. One, our pasuk regarding korbanot. The other, you can see where I'm pointing, regarding the mesorah, Adam, the leper, so to speak. A person, should he have a blemish, what turns into sara'at on his body. And the third is in Perashat Hukat, regarding the laws of para aduma and impurity, where it says, Zot HaTorah, Adam ki yamut be'ohel. This is the Torah, a person, when he passes be'ohel in a covered area, that speaks of the fact that anyone under the same covering with the deceased will contract what's called tum'ah, which is why a kohen, of course, can't be in the same room or overhang as a deceased. Those are the only 3 times in the Torah that the word Adam is used as a subject in and of itself. And we must take note of that. And I'm going to specifically talk about the first and the third time, which is our parasha, and the one Perashat Hukat regarding Tum'ah, Adam ki yamut be'ohel. What is it that the Torah is trying to convey to us with the terminology and the unconventional usage of the word Adam? We understand and we know that there are 4 levels of understanding Torah: Peshat, Derash, Remesh, and Sod. Peshat is the text presented to us and all the nuances and peculiarities within the text that triggers our thought process, that triggers Hachamim making midrashim, and helps us understand both storyline and mizvot. Derash, of course, is not necessarily a midrash, as in a midrash agada, or a historical or story-like idea to embellish upon a story in the Torah, but more so what's called midrash halacha, which is the oral law, Torah Sheba'al Peh's way of analyzing the written law, Torah Shebichtav, to derive a law. The last one is sod, which is secret, which means the depth, the underlying secretive level, you could say the mystical level of understanding Torah. And number 3 is called remez, hints. There are thousands of hints all over the Torah where the message is not direct, but it's indirect, and yet being conveyed in the undercurrent of the Pesukim. Let's focus on the remez. What is the powerful remez, the hint being or attempted to be conveyed to us by the Torah and using unconventional terminology. So here it is. Our pasuk, let's go back to it. I'm trying to point to it. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban ladonai. Can you see this document? Probably not, but there it is on top. Adam ki yakriv mikem korban ladonai. A man, shall you offer a korban to Hashem? And I'll say this idea in honor of my newly married daughter because I also mentioned it underneath the chuppah, trying to describe my brand new son-in-law. And the concept or description of a certain character of a person that emerges from this pasuk. Listen to the words. Ki yakriv means when you offer. It means when you offer something, but here ki yakriv mikem, when you offer from yourself, also can be looked as when you offer of yourself, which basically means that a person, people are inspired, God-fearing people, and especially Jewish people who are of the faith and God-fearing and committed, want to serve God. And this pasuk is sort of giving us a recipe. Adam, if you are a person that is overcome by the truth and tradition and want to serve God, I'll give you advice and make you understand the following, that when you want to serve, it has to be miken, from yourself. And actually, so much so that you will be a korban laHashem. You will be almost making yourself into an offering and into a sacrifice. And that basically is impressing upon us the fact that mizvot are not just ceremonial. When we pray to God and verbalize words, when we perform a mizvah physically, when we gave korbanot, sacrifices, and all the minute detailed mizvot and instructions entailed in them, they are not just ceremonial. A person must be willing to sacrifice, must be willing to give of himself mentally. And that also means that in order to serve God, it means that you have to be willing to sacrifice time and your physical effort, sometimes money and opportunities, financial opportunities. Ki yakriv mikem. Basically, self-sacrifice. Animal sacrifice is a hint to self-sacrifice, sacrificing ourselves. Ki yakriv mikem, give of yourself to God. If you understand that he's your creator and you're subservient to him, then that's the real way to serve God. And that is the wonderful remez, among other possibilities, that is being hinted to in this first pasuk of korbanot. That give not something, but give yourself first, then give something. So that is a wonderful hint in this Adam pasuk. The other one, which is in Perashat Hukat, Zot HaTorah Adam Ke'emud Be'ohol. Again, simply speaking, the pshat here, which then, so to speak, gives birth to the drash, is that when someone, God Bar Minan, dies in a covering, in a overhang, in an enclosed area, it's covered, everything shared under that area becomes tameh. But again, the word Adam, unconventional. The message, the Gemara says in 3 different places, En divrei Torah mekayemim ela b'misha memit asmo aleha. This is one of my favorite pasukim. I'm not alone. But based on this pasuk, the Torah, Gemara says in a number of places that divrei Torah will become established, will become understood. A person will master Torah, grow in Torah, which is, you can say one of our primary objectives as Jews is to educate ourselves in the knowledge and intellect of God, to be able not just to know his commandments, but to grow closer to him. It's not really going to be accomplished unless you're willing to lahamit et atzmo, to kill yourself, ba'ohel, in the tent. What does that mean? It means in the tent of Torah, in the context of study. Do you want to reach elevated levels, to grow as a Jew, to fulfill your objectives in your existence in this earth, and engaging in God's Torah and the ultimate gift he gave to the Jewish nation? You can do it and fulfill your basics by attending this class and other classes, by reading here and there. But if you really want to become something and master Torah, areas of Torah, you have to be willing to die in the tent. Obviously a metaphor. You have to be willing to sacrifice. And it does mean sacrificing time and sleep. And it certainly means sometimes sacrificing financial opportunity. And it can even mean sacrificing other accomplishments that might bring you popularity, prestige, and power. It certainly means humbling yourself. And it means racking your brains. It's charging your mental energy. You have to, so to speak, as we say, you got to kill yourself. You want to make $1, you got to kill yourself. You want to grow in Torah? Zot HaTorah. This is the way one really builds knowledge and skills and understanding of Torah. Adam, a being, a Jewish being, ki yamut be'ohel. Are you willing to go that far for Torah? Then you'll conquer. Then you'll master. Then you'll establish yourself as a learned Jew. So we have these two Adam words, incredible, in two different places, both conveying very similar ideas, and both telling us that mitzvot are not just robotic. We don't just perform them by rote. They're not just ceremonial, but also telling us that a person must self-sacrifice to build and become something as a Jew. Okay, let's go back to our first question, which was the first pasuk in that little letter, Vayiqra, and God called the little aleph. What does the Torah tell us? What do the Hachamim tell us about this little aleph? Well, first of all, let me introduce to you to other what's called otiyot ketanot. The other 5 instances in the Torah, they have small letters. Again, I'm sorry, we don't have our sophisticated normal presentation here over here for document, but if you can follow, I have small pesukim over here. Well, in Perashat Bereshit, ve'ele toledot hashemayim v'ha'aretz behibare'am. This is the story and history of heaven and earth. Behibare'am, the he, when God created them, the he is small on the word hibare'am, when God created. Another one in Parashat Hayeh Sarah, famously, when Abraham Abinu wanted to bury his wife Sarah, Vayabo Abraham the Surah, he came to eulogize his wife Sarah. V'lib kota, cry for her. The kaf and the kota is small. The third is our pasuk Vayiqra. The fourth is in next week's Parashat Sab, talking about the korban olah, the burnt offering, and the constant fire on the altar. Hi ha'olah al mokedah al hamizbeach kol halayla. The word mokedah, the mem is small, referring to the burnt offering that's being devoured by fire all night on the Mizbeach. Parashat Pinehas, the Yud in Pinehas, the grandson of Aharon, after his heroic act, is small. And Parashat Hazinu, Surya Yadecha Teshi Vadishka Mecholarecha, speaking of Am Yisrael, who would eventually forget and abandon God. The word Teshi, forget, Yud is small. We're not going to focus on all of these, but let's just talk about our parasha. Let's talk about the small aleph and what we get from it. What do Hachamim tell us are the possible hints, the remez, the hinting level of understanding Torah that one can extract from this small letter? There's an interesting midrash. It's called Midrash Otiyot Ketanot. The midrash tells us that the word Vayiqra, you can read it without the aleph at the end. Vayiqra, there's a kamas under the resh, and you would still sound the same. The Torah added an aleph, but made it small to show you that we're adding, so to speak, an aleph. To contrast the prophecy of Gentile, were there to be a Gentile prophet, which there was Balaam, and Jewish prophets. And to say that God prophets, that the Gentile prophet prophesizes from God in a incomplete manner, but the Nevi'ei Yisrael, the prophets of Israel, in a complete manner, in a complete communication. How do we see that? Well, the word with Vayikra without the aleph is also could also be read Vayikar Elohim El Bilam. It's the actual pasuk, which means mikre, which is the terminology of randomness and temporary nature, so to speak. There's a deficiency in that type of prophecy. We add that small aleph to tell us that, that's the addition, that's the contrast between the way we are so fortunate to be able honored to be able to prophesize, at least our great prophets in Am Yisrael. The Kli Yakar takes that a step further and says that, Moshe Rabbeinu here, so to speak, he over-prophesied. In other words, he had this incredible ability given to him by God, where he prophesied beyond what maybe man was meant to communicate to God. That little aleph gives us the beautiful feeling of fortunate nature, that we have this great opportunity in history to communicate with God as prophets of Israel. Here's another idea. There's a midrash that says that you're supposed to start teaching children the laws of korbanot from when they're young. Why is that? The midrash says, just like korbanot are tehorim, should be pure, so too children are pure, right? Based on that, the idea possibly being conveyed to us is that just like there's other Pesukim, by the way, that support this idea, but it's hinted to in the small aleph. In other words, that start teaching your children korbanot when they're small, when they're young, when they can absorb the ideas in a very technical manner without asking too many questions and being possibly cynical about it. Small aleph, small children. Beautiful, very nice. There's other commentaries to the extent that the aleph means that possibly limud Torah, as we said in that previous pasuk, Adam kemut be'ohel, is only accomplished by someone who approaches it in a small manner, in a humble manner when he learns, humbles himself to learn Torah. And finally, I'll bring in one more idea. There are some that say that Moshe Rabbeinu requested that aleph to be small, so it could appear as if the word says Vayiqra, that God appeared to him randomly, and not to feel arrogant, as if he's some kind of permanent prophet. If you put all these together, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, you really see one basic idea for this small aleph, and that is our approach to serving God with korbanot or anything else. First off, we feel prestiged and fortunate to be able to have this opportunity, the small aleph. Also, we must practice mitzvot from a young age and train our children and get them used to the routine of mitzvot. And we also always approach them humbly and not do them for the sake of the mitzvah, but the sake of being subservient to God. Amazing that both the nuance of the second pasuk, Adam, and the nuance of the first pasuk, the letter, small letter aleph, really are conveying in general similar ideas. That the worship of God is something that is engaged in not just physically and ceremonially, but it's engaged in mentally with full character, with full conviction, and with an appreciation of what we're doing and the opportunity that we have to fulfill mitzvot and to learn Torah on this earth. All hinted to in this remez, hinting level of understanding in the first two Pesukim in the book of Vayiqra. I'll end off by mentioning that the two major themes on a holiday of Pesach, on Seder night, and reverberating throughout all the readings of Pesach are, of course, gratitude to God in choosing us as the single nation on earth that can represent him and serve him and merit future redemption. But of course, also the idea of herut, freedom, and subservience to God, and understanding that freeing ourselves from the tendencies and draws and desires and culture of the rest of the world means subjecting ourselves only to the one and only Creator. And that so much is embedded in these two ideas of Adam ki yakriv mikem. When a person serves God, he gives fully of himself to God, and that small aleph. As we serve God humbly, we serve God all our lives from a young to an old age, and we serve God with understanding how fortunate we are to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So our Torah hints to us, as it teaches us, of so many lessons within the nuances of Pesukim. And here we learn that it's not just in the ceremony, but it's in the intent, and it's in the character. And we segue our parasha into the holiday of Pesach, hopefully inspiring us to approach this holiday with a great deal of not just feeling fortunate and prestigious, but also subserving and being subservient and subjecting ourselves to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shabbat Shalom Borah.